We're in this journey in Romans, and we have noticed, if you've been following along with us, that in the first 8 chapters, Paul does this amazing unpacking of the gospel, of the good news of the kingdom of the heavens. And then in chapter 9, he starts to grapple with the reality that, hey, if Jesus is Israel's Messiah, and this is great news, the best news in the whole world, why is it that so many of his fellow Jewish family are not embracing Jesus as Messiah? And we looked at that last week, and we looked at the agony that this brings Paul. And this week we come to Romans, and we come to where Paul starts to unpack, how do you respond then to this lack of belief? In Romans 9, he defended God against the various charges that it might be God's fault that they haven't believed. Chapter 10, where we're at now, he's going to start to think about, what do we do practically? And again, like last week, lest you think this has no relevance to me because I'm not Jewish and I have no Jewish friends or family that I care about. This can apply to anyone about whom we care. As we start here, you can just think about the people in your life who are not yet perhaps fully in the kingdom of heaven, not fully trusting Jesus, or not even vaguely trusting Jesus. And you can think about how this might affect you and them. So how does it start? Like Romans 9, he starts with an affirmation of his own experience given the situation. He says, brothers and sisters, my heart's desire and prayer to God for the Israelites is that they may be saved. What do you really want for those who are closest to you? When you think about your family and friends, the people you go to work with, maybe you're going to go to work tomorrow, you're going to log in on Zoom, or you're going to walk into the office. Do you have a deep desire that the people all around you may be saved? Now, of course, that begs a question, doesn't it? What question should spring to your mind when you hear that? What could spring to mind? What is saved? Do they really need saving? Aren't they already saved? Isn't this a terribly arrogant, exclusive claim to make? Isn't everyone okay? Really, as long as they sincerely believe whatever they believe? Who am I to say that you need saving? That's a good question. Every people group, every religion, every world view has a conception of what it is to be saved. And you can think of being saved as being spared the consequences of less than ideal choices and becoming a being who really flourishes and your full humanity is expressed. So in our culture, perhaps, if you take the Alex Greenwich bill before Parliament at the moment, and what that represents culturally, of what that is saying is to be saved, even though there's no explicit deity or divinity to save us, to be saved within that worldview is to embrace radical inclusion. Right? That's the essence of it. There are these primitive, sinful people who exclude people or believe there's an object of reality to which we have to submit our feelings and our desires and our actions. But actually the path of salvation is to embrace this worldview that makes us radically inclusive. And then that'll make you a good person. You will flourish once you move from exclusion to inclusion, okay? And you don't need God. Now, religions have specific deities attached, but every culture, every worldview has a sense of what does it mean to move from here to here, from a way that isn't flourishing to a way that will flourish. Okay. The question is, well, which of them is true, right? And Christianity makes the claim that everybody is disconnected from God, and therefore our humanity can't flourish fully, and the way to be saved is to be reconnected to God, who is love, God who is the source of infinite personal energy at the heart of the universe. right? And that's what we all need. And of course, what's interesting, I've always found this fascinating. Some people, I don't hear it that much anymore. Some people say, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you believe it sincerely, right? You're going to, the Bible says that's not enough. Sincerity is not the same as truth. Doesn't make it true, right? If the Pharisees, who Paul is talking about, need to be saved, then everybody needs to be saved, because you couldn't get more sincere about their beliefs than the Pharisees in Paul's day. If you've ever seen an ultra-Orthodox community, you go to Israel, you go to parts of Melbourne, you go to parts of Sydney, and the Hasidim or the Haredis in their black hats and their black coats, they are the inheritors of the Pharisaism of Paul's day. They are incredibly sincere and hardworking, diligent, and uber religious. And Paul says they still need to be saved. So that should be your, and if it's true for them, it's so massively true for the people you're going to go to work with tomorrow. And all your friends on social media, and your family, and your loved ones, and you, and me. So that's your desire. And that desire is tied up with prayer. So what moves us to prayer is our desire for the full flourishing and good of the people we care about. We just think that if Christianity is true, living life with God in the kingdom of the heavens now is the best possible way to live. There's no better way to live, and there's certainly no better way to die. We should want that for everyone, and that should move us to prayer. I was meeting this week with someone from church who has taken me up on this offer of coaching and mentoring. And we were talking about their friends and how do you reach them? And I said, well, it just starts with prayer. You go, okay, how do you pray for your friends? I said, what you got to do is you've got to have a trigger. So our behavior changes when something triggers us, right? So what we decided is that they would have just the first names of their 5 friends that would go on the home screen, put a sticky note on the home screen of their phone. So every time he opened his phone, which is probably no more than 20 times a minute, he would see the names of his friends and be triggered just to pray for them. Say, Lord bless. And it doesn't have to be a big, long prayer, just Lord bless them, Lord save them, Lord heal them, because that's what we want for people we care for. Okay, desire and prayer. And Paul says, he points out in verse 2, I can testify about them, they're zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on knowledge, since they did not know the righteousness of God and sought to establish their own. They did not know the righteousness of God, but sought to establish their own. Another way of thinking about this in our day and age is, you can think of righteousness as establishing this sense that I'm enough. I've talked about this quite a bit. Our culture we're driven to establish our own sense of being enough. Zealous for it, aren't we? In our subculture, we are the personal development, personal self-improvement generation and subculture. The amount of money we all spend on self-help books, on counselors, on therapists, on gym memberships, on personal trainers, on ice baths, on infrared saunas, on makeup, on fashion, we are massively invested in establishing our own righteousness. That is, establishing our own sense of being enough, our own sense of being good, our own sense of making life work, aren't we? Like everywhere. We're in secular Roselle and Balmain in Sydney. We are as zealous about establishing that for ourselves as any ultra-Orthodox Jew in Crown Heights in Brooklyn or in Jerusalem is about establishing their own righteousness in a more explicitly religious way. Aren't we? We're just doing it. We're very zealous. But what I love is we have a zeal without knowledge. That is, we don't know. So what is knowledge? What is truth? Truth is accuracy of representation. Knowledge is a justified true belief. So they don't know. We think that if we just get fit, stay fit, have the latest fillers, do all these things, get promoted, save money, have the right holiday, eat at the right restaurant, see the right therapist, get the right whatever it is. If we just do that, then our lives will be enough and will count and will matter. But it won't, because our zeal is not based on knowledge, because real knowledge of the world as it is says without God, all our efforts in the end won't be enough. We can't establish righteousness on our own, because in verse 4, Paul says, Messiah, Christ, is the culmination, the fullness, the completion, the end, the goal of the Torah, of the law, so that there might be righteousness for everyone who believes. That's important, that our righteousness, our wholeness, is given to us by Messiah Jesus, not by our own achievements, because if righteousness were based on achievement, then the vast majority of people would never accomplish that, would never get it. If it's based on your ethnicity, born Jewish, then sorry, you're all in trouble. If it's based on your religious and moral observances, then you're in trouble, right? So if righteousness comes from being really moral, what about the addict? What about, if righteousness is based on ability and achievement, what about the intellectually handicapped person? What about the elderly person with dementia? If righteousness is anything that we do, it's going to be exclusive, and most people aren't going to get it. And Paul goes, actually, Christ is the fulfillment of every human longing and the basic structure of the universe that moves us in this direction. And that means that there can be righteousness for everyone, because the righteousness comes to those who believe. It's a righteousness that is a gift, not an accomplishment. So it's radically inclusive. Okay. He then goes on to unpack this a little bit and makes this radical claim, the difference between the righteousness that is by Torah, by law, and the righteousness of Christ. He says, the person does these things will live by them, but the righteousness that is by faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend to heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the dead, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. Now you go, what the heck does that mean? I don't know if you thought that. Mostly when you read that, you go, what the heck does that mean? Anne's nodding. She prepared this Bible reading, and she was probably thinking to herself, what the heck does that mean? He's quoting from the Old Testament, and he's saying, if you're a follower of Jesus, then you don't have to think that God and his righteousness is inaccessible. Another way of putting it is, the positive way of putting verse 6, the righteousness that comes, the enoughness, the life that comes by trust, by faith, is accessible. It's easily accessible. You don't have to go to heaven to go and go up to heaven by some mystical encounter or some religious good works to try and drag righteousness down, nor do you have to go to hell to drag. Now, I was thinking about this. I say, this might be allegorizing, but I thought the going to hell is plumbing the depths of sensual, sensory self-expression. You're not going to find Jesus. You have to go and grab it by being moral, nor are you going to find it by just giving in to all your desires and pursuing whatever you want or you can in terms of sensory achievement. In fact, verse 9, what does it say? What does it say? Interesting, isn't it? Look at what does it say? The word is near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart. That is, it's universally accessible. It's available. It's accessible to anyone who wants it. You don't have to go searching. You don't have to go looking. The word comes to us. God comes to us. We don't have to go and drag the word down from heaven or find Jesus in hell, find righteousness in hell. That is the message concerning faith that we proclaim. What is it? How do we know we've been saved? What is the message? What do you and I have to do? If I don't have to go to heaven and I don't have to go to hell, if I don't have to be on this relentless treadmill of trying to establish my own righteousness or enoughness, this is what Paul says. We confess. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And so you go, wow, what does that mean? What does it mean? It means how are you going to receive the life that God has for you? How are you going to enter into the kingdom of the heavens now? You're going to do it by having your whole being receiving and living in the good news of Jesus. Declare with your mouth, Jesus is Lord. That's the earliest Christian creed. In the Roman days, there were the Roman creed, which made you a good Roman, which established your righteousness in the Roman Empire, was Caesar is Lord. There are still inscriptions you can find. Coins from the day have on the words, Caesar is Lord. And over and against that, Paul says, no, the Christians say, no, Jesus is Lord. Okay, so you've got to say Jesus is Lord. But Paul is also very aware that you and I have the potential to be hypocrites, or the potential to think, I'll have one part of me that is just public, Jesus is Lord. He says, it's not just your mouth, it's your heart as well. And in your heart, you've got to believe Jesus was raised from the dead. So it's an integrated being that you live from the inside out. The fact that in your heart, at the core of your being, you believe Jesus was raised from the dead means that you're going to confess because of his resurrection, he is Lord. And you can confess that he is Lord because in your heart of hearts you believe this. And when this change has happened in you, you'll be saved. Because that's a sign that God has worked in your life, that you're part of his family, that you've abandoned your attempts to establish your own righteousness, your own enoughness, and you've just come to Jesus with empty hands and you've said, you died, you rose again for me, I trust you, I'll follow you. Okay, so let me give you a little picture of what this looks like. Okay. So now, we discover many things. Imagine this is your life. And this is meant to look like a what? A wheel. Oh, thank you. Yes, someone pictured it. Okay. Now, and the spokes of your wheel. So there's your life, and you want your life to roll along and be awesome. Now, this isn't going to be comprehensive, but on these spokes, you have a variety of things, right? So you can have, what are the things that you base your life on that make your life work? Let's say there's family here, right? And you can't really see that, can you? I'll make it bigger. Let's say this one's family. You need a whole bunch of money. These days, maybe US dollars more helpful than Australian dollars. What else do you need to make your life go work? You need work, don't you? You need a career, you need vocation, don't you? You need your health. And let's just say you're all here and you're awesome and you're super religious. You need God, don't you? Does that look like a decent picture? Here's the question for you. What is at the center that holds it all together? What's the hub? Now, in our culture, the hub is typically the thing that organizes it all, keeps all the spokes together. That's like on a wheel, that's the critical part of the infrastructure, right? Your wheel can still work if you bust a spoke or two. But if something goes wrong with the hub, the whole thing's doesn't work. So what's at the hub? In our culture, mostly the hub is what? I would say it's self, isn't it? You're at the center. You construct your life. You make the decisions, and all the self-development work, even in this little wheel, will be like, okay, so you get all these things in balance and you work out your work-life balance and you figure out what you want to do that's going to fulfill you at work, and you figure out how much money you need to have a good retirement. It's the self, right? This is the way to not be saved. What is the way to be saved? Too broad. Okay, let's do that. The way to be saved is to do a little switcheroo, isn't it? What goes at the center? God. You put Jesus at the center. And then your life yourself works. Put church here or whatever else. That's it. I've done this picture so many times with people. And I remember when I first came across it, and you go, Jesus is not just one spoke on your life. He's the organizing center at the heart of your life. And when Jesus is at the center, that's what it means for Jesus to be Lord. And he can be Lord because he's risen from the dead. He's conquered everything that would smash your spokes. And when Jesus is the center, all the other spokes can be rightly aligned, and your life will work. That's the flourishing of all humanity. When Jesus organizes how you spend your money, how you look after your health, how you prioritize your family and your time and your work and all those things, then life works. So here's the question. If you were radically honest, is Jesus the hub or the spoke in your life? Maybe he's not even a spoke. Maybe he's not a hub. Maybe he's a spoke. Maybe at some point in time he was a hub. But then as life's gone on, you've made him a spoke. This is how we are saved. And if that's all true, what's the final requirement? Where do we end up with, Paul says, is we want to tell people about this. We want to tell people about this good news of Jesus. How then can they call on the one they've not believed? And how can they believe in the one of whom not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. If you want beautiful feet, don't go to a nail clinic, as good as that is. If you want truly beautiful feet, tell people the good news about Jesus. In whatever way you can. Pray for them. Love them. Serve them. That's what we're here to do as a church, right? One of the things we'll think about, and we need to always be thinking about, is if this is true, how do we not hold on to this for ourselves? It's the best news in the world for everyone. So we need to think about that. And this is how Paul answers the question about what do we do about Israel. You pray for them. You understand why they need to be saved. You understand the role that Jesus should have in their lives. And then you go and you tell them. You go and you tell them. And we'll think a little more next week about whether this is effective or not and what that means for our friends. Before we leave this morning, I have 2 questions for you. Here's your homework. Do a ruthless self-examination of your life. Maybe ask someone close to you. And ask them this question. On the evidence of my behavior, is Jesus a spoke or a hub in my life? On the evidence of my behavior, is he a spoke or is he a hub? And then find 3 people. Think about 3 people who you care about, who you want to pray that they will find Jesus, and ask God to give you the opportunities to speak to them and ask God to bless them. That's it. Simple. Self-analysis, and then write down the names of 3 people and start praying for them. And then come back and report on that next week. How it's going. Sound okay? Lord Jesus, thank you that you lived and died and rose again to bring us life, and that life is accessible to us. We don't have to go searching for it. You've come to us. We don't have to reach up to heaven by being all super moral or religious. We don't have to go down to hell by trying to experience everything this world has to offer and indulge every sensory experience we have. But you've come to us. And no matter where we are, no matter who we are, we can just reach out and trust you and embrace that truth. Thank you for that. And I pray that each of us today will be very honest about the role you play in our lives. And give us grace today, Lord Jesus, to maybe move you from being a spoke to having you at the center, as a hub in our lives. Help us to make whatever changes are necessary to bring this about. And then, Lord, help us to tell others and to live in a way that bears witness to the wonder of this truth. And we ask this in your name, Lord. Amen. And the PS is, if you want prayer about this or you want a conversation with me about what it would practically mean to have Jesus at the center, just reach out to me. I'd love to meet and chat.